Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Creamsicle Chronicle podcast. My name is JT Olson, flying solo tonight. Co-host Garrett Ballard, he's on the IR. He's out sick, wish he could be here. Got a big episode planned, going to talk about our mock off-season, what we would do going into free agency, into the draft. Obviously, free agency starts on Monday, so a lot of speculation, a lot of conversation about who the Bucs are going to target, what they should do. Got a little bit of money to play with, but not a lot. And we already know that re-signing their own guys is going to be the top priority. Jason Light has said as much. Said it at the Combine, bringing in his key free agents. And honestly, he's already halfway home. He has already re-signed Mike Evans, 2-year contract. Let's put the franchise tag on Antoine Winfield Jr. That's 2 of the 4 or 5, depending on how you look at it, big free agent signings. Obviously, Baker Mayfield, quarterback, he is the next domino to fall. And of course, Lavonte David, he's already said he wants to be here. He is going between Bucs and retirement, and he is not really feeling like retirement. So those 2 are the next up. And somewhere in the midst of that, you got to re-sign Chase McLaughlin. He was one of the best Bucs kickers of my lifetime. I mean, the curse had been on Tampa Bay and the kicking game for so long. You found a solution to it. You got to keep that guy in-house. So there's still a lot of work to be done, but let's take a minute. Let's applaud Jason Light. Let's applaud Mike Greenberg for bringing back Mike Evans. Operation Pay Mike was a resounding success. 2 years, and I think it was $52 million was the money, but some of that is incentive. So the salary is $41 million with some incentive. I think he has to be top 10 in receptions, top 10 in yards, top 10 in touchdowns to get some of those things to kick in. But the really cool thing about this contract is Bucs are only going to pay him $5 million this year. And they're going to pay him about $22 million next year, and they got a void year after that. So they're spacing this money out. Gives them a little bit more to play with. And the money's great. You know, you got other guys to sign. Your own guys. You want to bring in a couple guys. Mike helped make that happen. But getting Mike back is the big story. Buccaneer for life. That's what he said he wants. He wants to be a Buccaneer for life. And this will take him in his age 31 and 32 season. Okay. That, a lot of times, is the lifespan of a wide receiver. Especially a guy who's a big body wide receiver. Mike Evans, 6'5", 230, downfield threat. Start to get into those early mid-30s. A lot of guys lose a step. Now, obviously, Mike has shown no signs of slowing down. In fact, last year was one of his better years. Over 1,200 yards, 13 touchdowns, led the league in that category. It's pretty good. You know, just a drop in the bucket for Mike, really. 1,000 yards, double-digit touchdowns, that's what he does. So to bring that guy back was absolutely critical. Not just because, you know, he is an all-time great Buccaneer. Some people are calling him Mr. Buccaneer. I think Rondé Barber and Derek Brooks might have some claim to that as well. But, you know, he's that kind of guy. A lifer. A Hall of Famer. Guy who has shattered every offensive record he can. So that's great. Bringing that guy back, always amazing. You want to have those guys in your franchise. You know, it's your history. You're writing it right now. But in the short term, how important he is to the offense is what really matters here. This offense really ran through Mike a lot last year. Struggled to run the ball. Baker Mayfield bouncing around. His career was really revived in part with Dave Canales and the system he brought, but also because he had Mike Evans. Mike Evans, you could just throw it to and make things happen. He's never had a player as good as Mike Evans to work with. I mean, Odell Beckham Jr., not bad. I think he had DJ Moore for a minute in Carolina. Okay, that's good. But neither of those guys are Mike Evans. Mike Evans, a Hall of Famer in his prime. And he elevated Baker Mayfield. He carried them to victories. I mean, let's not forget the first time they played the Panthers. Bucs were losing a lot of that game until Mike Evans had a game-changing play. So what he means for this offense, with a quarterback who is still trying to prove himself at best, or they could have what's behind door number 2, which is a whole nother can of worms. Getting him back was essential. This offense is not good as it is. It's better than it was the last year of Tom Brady, but it's still not great. If you lost Mike Evans, you're dead. This offense is nothing. It is a journeyman quarterback. It is Chris Godwin. It is a running game that is non-existent, and it's about half a functional offensive line. So getting Mike Evans back really keeps this offense afloat, keeps them off life support. And he wasn't even the big guy you signed. Mike Evans, as great as he is, as important as he is to this offense, since early 30s, he's got more of his career behind him than he does ahead of him. Antoine Winfield Jr., Buccaneers placed the franchise tag on, and he was really the big one this offseason. I'll say it over and over again, he's the best safety in the game this year. He's coming off a career year, an all-pro year. No one was better at his position than him. You had to have him back. He is right in the prime of his career, just coming off his rookie deal. You want to bring him in for the next 3 to 5 years, and you want to pay him extremely well. Really, I'm expecting them to reset the safety market because he's that good. What he meant for the defense last year was everything. With the turnovers he forced, when and where he forced them, a lot of times on the goal line. With the revolving door in the secondary between Carlton Davis missing time, Jamel Dean missing time, Ryan Neal just kind of struggling sometimes, whether that's his fault or how Todd Bowles chose to use him. Antoine Winfield Jr. was the one steady presence back there, and he played at an elite level. So when you're losing talent like Devin White, and say what you will about him, he is very talented. When you're losing leadership like Will Golston, guy who's been with the Bucs for over a decade. When Levante David has one foot in retirement. Antoine Winfield is your next guy. We talk about Levante David and Mike Evans as future Hall of Famers. Winfield is that next wave. He's writing his story right now. Him and Tristan Wirfs. You got 2 Hall of Famers on the back end, 2 right in the heart of their career. So to bring one of those guys back, even right now, is just a year. It had to happen. And they have reported they are working towards a long-term deal. I expect that to reset the safety market, be around $20 million a year. I expect that to give them a little bit of flexibility. Jason Light and company are going to work their magic, and it's going to free up a little bit of money now, put a little bit more on the back end when they get a little more breathing room, and it's going to let them play a little bit more in free agency. But regardless, having him back, it is the most important thing that could have happened for this team this year. That was the win of the offseason. Nothing could have been more important. Even losing Mike Evans, it would have been awful. But he's really only got 2 or 3 more years playing at this level. Antoine's probably got more like 8. So, I mean, that's just a numbers game. Regardless of what you think about the players, both are great. Both are essential to this team. You can have one for 2 years. You can have one for 8 years. Got to bring back the 8-year guy. The Bucs got it done. So kudos, Jason Light, proving once again why he's one of the elite GMs in the NFL. Still got work to do, though. It's the big two. Lavonte David, Baker Mayfield. And I have no doubt that it'll get done. There is some talk that Baker's flirting with Atlanta, Baker's flirting with Minnesota, the Patriots were interested. And, I'm sure there have been conversations. An agent's not doing his job if conversations aren't getting had. You network, you schmooze, you talk hypotheticals. Hey, Atlanta, if Baker comes down there, what are you going to offer us? Hey, Minnesota, Kirk Cousins might be out the door. How much you going to offer us? That's the nature of the business. And is it a little bit of hardball? Maybe. But when it comes right down to it, this is a quarterback who was on his 4th team in a calendar year. Tampa Bay Buccaneers revived his career. He's got Mike Evans. He's got Chris Godwin. He's got Rachaad White. He's got an offensive coordinator who he knows and is comfortable with. And the Bucs are going to add to that group this offseason. They're going to add to the offensive line to protect him. And I think they're probably going to add a weapon or two. So really, I mean, you look at it, this is really the best situation for Baker Mayfield. And if that means taking a little bit less money, I think that would probably be beneficial for him. Granted, Minnesota's a good situation. Atlanta's a good situation. But that's a change. That is going to yet another team trying to prove himself to another locker room and another coaching staff. And frankly, he's probably tired of that. From Cleveland to Carolina to Los Angeles to Tampa, he's finally found a home. He's finally found a group of teammates who embrace him. Because even when he was in Cleveland, even after he won a playoff game, there was some division in that locker room around Baker Mayfield. He was not the most popular guy with some of his teammates. There was a lot of locker room drama. And some of that was his fault, I'm sure. Some of that was not. But this locker room in Tampa Bay, they love Baker Mayfield. They embrace him. They embody his personality. It's not a guarantee you find that again in Minnesota. It's not a guarantee you find that in Atlanta. I think when it comes right down to it, the culture, the comfort level, the familiarity, all of those things are going to be a huge factor. And I think Baker Mayfield is going to come back. Probably closer to the Geno Smith contract than the Daniel Jones contract. Call it 30-ish million a year, 32 million a year, 33 million a year, somewhere in that ballpark. I think that's a comfortable number for both sides. You call it 2 or 3 years, I think everybody wins there. And then Lavonte David, that will get done. I have no doubt about that. What he means to this franchise, what he means to this defense, especially with Devin White walking out the door, Lavonte will be back. I have no doubt. It's just a matter of time. So with that said, Garrett and I have prepared mock off seasons tonight. Now, Garrett's not here, but he sent me his plan. So I want to go over his first before I get into mine. So obviously, he had the re-signing of Mike Evans. Even before that happened, that was part of his plan. He's going to re-sign Baker Mayfield. Called that about $100 million over 3 years. So he had a little bit more than I would expect. Obviously, the Antoine Whitfield contract, it's already done. Get that to a long-term deal. He wanted to re-sign Lavonte David. That'll get done. $7 million there. So bringing back the key Buccaneers. Additionally, he's bringing back a familiar face. He is re-signing Jordan Whitehead. Safety was just recently released by the Jets, Super Bowl champion with the Buccaneers, bringing him back for a 2-year deal. I think he's 27 now. That'll bring him to 29, 30 years old, kind of right towards the end of his prime. Makes sense. Bucs need a safety. I think that's very logical. I think he's going to be affordable because this is a very talent-rich safety free agency class. So everyone's going to be signing a safety. So a guy who's more like a box safety in Jordan Whitehead might be a little bit devalued in this class. So I think that's a very logical signing. It's also bringing in running back Zach Moss, more of a between the tackles guy, a compliment to Rashad White. 1 year, $3 million. He's signing linebacker Blake Cashman for 2 years and $10 million. And he's signing Aaron Brewer, 3 years, $24 million. So those are some of those new names. So, again, getting those key guys back and just kind of adding some supplementary guys. A box safety who's a little bit of a role player. A linebacker to replace Devin White. A second string running back. A starting caliber guard. Crazy concept. No huge splashes, and I think that's what we can expect. As much as I would absolutely love to take a run at Danielle Hunter, I don't see that happening. I don't see any big trades happening. The likes of Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, said to be on the market this offseason. Bucs need a pass rusher. As much as I would love to bring one of those two guys in, the money just doesn't make sense. Those guys are making north of $20 million, and the Bucs just don't have it. And they can play with the salary cap. They can add void years. Eventually, you just got to take your medicine. Look, we got to pay our bills. We did a lot of that last year. We still got some this year. We're paying some bills. Shaq Barrett still owed some money. Ryan Jensen still owed some money. We can't make that big splash. It's a bummer because I would love to sit here and have this exercise where we can make a big splash. But really, I just don't think it's possible. As I click off my Khalil Mack stats page. So that's it for free agency for Garrett. Like I said, a couple of role players, a starting guard, a starting linebacker, a starting safety. Then he took it to the draft. And in the draft, at pick 26, Garrett traded it away. Traded pick 26 for pick 41 and pick 58. And with the 41st pick of the NFL draft, Garrett took a pass rusher. Adisa Isaac out of Penn State. Pass rusher, I think, is the Bucs, if not their biggest need, their second biggest need. Interior offensive line, pass rush. Those are the things the Bucs really need this offseason. And if you can't get one in free agency, you got to get one in the draft. I don't know if you can find an impact guy in free agency, especially with your price range you're working with. Maybe a guy like Josh Uche. He's kind of a rotational pass rusher for the Patriots. Maybe you can get the best out of him here, but maybe he's just another face in the crowd. You've got guys like that. You have Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. You have Anthony Nelson. You have good quality edge guys. You're looking for a difference maker, and you're probably not going to get that in free agency. So it's got to be in the draft. And Garrett has that being the top pick. Totally understandable. After that, he addresses the next biggest need. Guard from Kansas State, Cooper Beebe. Big, powerful, imposing run blocker. He's kind of a boulder to run around in pass protection. Really good player. I think he is one of the better offensive linemen in this class. I have no qualms with it whatsoever. Next, that extra pick he picked up from trading back. Wide receiver. I think this is a sneaky need for the Bucs. Mike Evans is in his early 30s. Chris Godwin's entering the last year of his deal. He's approaching 30. So getting a wide receiver this offseason, I think, is important. Garrett is taking wide receiver from South Carolina, Xavier Leggett. Leggett is a thickly built dude, 6'1", 220. Kind of a A.J. Brown build, but he is very, very fast. Ran, I think, in the high 4.3s at the combine. So he's an outside guy. Got Mike Evans on one side, Leggett on the other, Godwin in the slot. Rotate Trey Palmer in. You got two guys who run 4.3 plus Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Now you're cooking. Now I don't care who your quarterback is, they're set up for success. So very much agree with taking a wide receiver early. Next on his list, linebacker out of Michigan, Junior Colson. I like Colson. Colson, I think, is a top 3 linebacker in this class, and I think the top 3 are all very close. I think him, Peyton Wilson from South Carolina. NC State. One of those Carolinas. It's NC State. And then Cedric Gray from North Carolina. Those two and Junior Colson are all very good. Not great. They're not first round, second round kind of guys, maybe second round. But they're all very solid quality players. So getting him this late, I think, is really good value. He is big, physical, and surprisingly fluid. He's not KJ Britt. He's not just a between the tackles thumper. A guy who's kind of flirting with 240. Or nearly 250 at college. So he's a big guy. So if you can get Britt and David and Colson, that's a really strong group of linebackers. Next up, one of my favorite prospects in this draft, tight end Theo Johnson from Penn State. Now, here's what Theo Johnson is. He is a remarkable athlete. He is like a record-setting tight end athlete. No one comes close to him. He got a perfect 10 out of 10 RAS score. And if you don't know what that means, that's like percentile. He scored in the 100th percentile. And that's almost impossible. Like only one guy is the 100th percentile. That's the top of the pyramid. That's Theo Johnson. He is big. He is fast. He is a good blocker. I think he will be at worst, a really good role player with sky-high potential. Then to round it out, I won't get too much into it. These 6th, 7th round picks, you're just kind of taking a flyer. And frankly, I don't know a lot about these guys he picked because that's way further in the draft process than I'm at right now. He has Kingsley Garrett, why are you going to do this to me with a last name like this? Kingsley Aguacan, center from Florida. You Florida people probably know this name a lot better than I do. So you probably know him a lot more than I do. Then in the 7th round, he takes Evan Anderson. That's more like it. Nice, easy last name there. Defensive lineman from Florida Atlantic. And then finally, he takes Akeem Dent, safety from Florida State, rounds out his draft. And those guys are depth. That is, maybe a starting center at some point. So in this scenario, Garrett brought in Aaron Brewer to be a starting guard and Cooper Beebe. So you probably have your 2 interior guys there, maybe moving Cody Mock to center. And Kingsley is a depth interior guy to be developed. Evan Anderson, interior depth on the defensive line. and you're throwing another dart at safety. All very logical picks. And the ones I know about, I agree with them. I like them. So Garrett addressed all the needs in pass rusher, offensive line, wide receiver, got that complimentary running back in free agency, got a starting safety. Really good offseason here. A lot of things I like. Mine looks different, but a lot of things I like. Now I'll get to mine. And mine is very similar in terms of free agency. I already have Mike Evans. I am working towards a long-term extension with Antoine Winfield because the franchise tag really hurts in terms of salary cap. It is $17 million, and it is nothing you can do to play with it. You can't manipulate it. You can't add void years. It is $17 million right there. So I want a long-term extension worked out this offseason so I can manipulate that contract, maybe free up a little bit more money on the front end, and I can add a little bit more in free agency this year. So that's part of my offseason plan, is getting that long-term deal done. Of course, re-signing Baker Mayfield, we'll call it 3 years, $99 million, 33 a year. So actually, that's the exact same number Garrett had. And then Levante David, 1 year. I think $7 million is very reasonable. That's the number Garrett had. $7-8 million. I think he's going to land right in that range. To kind of give me that money in my pocket, I'm going to cut Russell Gage. He is someone who hasn't really impacted this team, and injuries have been the biggest part of that. And that's not his fault, so I don't want to wish anything bad on him. I don't think fans should have any grudge against him. Like, he came here and, it was part of his retirement plan, like he was Chris Baker. Gage came in, he gave it his all. It was an unfortunate situation he got hurt. But honestly, I want that money back. So I'm cutting him. I'm taking the $7 million I saved from cutting Russell Gage, and I am giving that to Levante David. So, and of course, I'm getting Chase McLaughlin back. I will not even pretend I mapped out contract numbers for a kicker. So, little bit of money to play with. I'm targeting 2 names in free agency. Just 2. I am going for a little bit more quality than quantity, but nothing extravagant, nothing over the top. The 2 names I'm really going hard at in free agency are Lloyd Cushenberry, center, free agent from the Denver Broncos. He was part of that historic LSU team with Joe Burrow. He was the center there. He's a big body, 320 pounds. And I think there are a lot of really good centers in this draft. Jackson Powers Johnson, Zach Frazier, Graham Barton, all guys who are very well respected, guys I really like, but they lack experience at the NFL level. I want my man in the middle to be able to make the calls. I want him to know what the blitzes look like. I want him to have been there, done that. Bucs got that with Ryan Jensen, and it worked out really, really well. So Lloyd Cushenberry is my big target in free agency. The next guy I'm looking at is a guy who I think will fit in really well in Tampa. He played in a very similar offense the last couple of years in Seattle. Obviously, Dave Canales came from Seattle, and really, even though it's a new offensive coordinator, it's going to look very similar to what they were doing, that Sean McVay kind of offense. And that guy is tight end Noah Fant. Noah Fant, super, super athletic tight end. He's no Theo Johnson, but he's still very, very athletic. And I think he's going to make a really nice compliment to Cade Otton. Cade Otton, he's Mr. Reliable. He kind of works the middle routes, works the intermediate, makes tough catches, kind of developing as a blocker still, but he's not explosive. He's not that kind of athlete. Fant is. And even though he's never had the production that you might have thought coming out of the draft with that kind of athletic skill set, he is still a weapon. So if I plug him next to Otten, I think that's a really, really solid duo. I feel really good about that pair. And tight end is done. It's addressed. It's fixed. You got Fant, who's more a down the middle, up the seam kind of guy. He's more explosive. He has to keep defensive honest. And you got Mr. Reliable and Otten. It's a 1-2 punch that I really like. So that's it. That's all my money. I don't get to splash around with guys like Jordan Whitehead. I don't get to bring in a backup running back. I don't get to bring in a starting guard or a starting linebacker. I spent all my money on two, I won't say big names, but a little bit bigger names. They're discount bin, but they're like $5 movie discount bin. They're like the top of the discount bin. So that takes me right to my draft. Still got a lot of needs to hit. I need a starting guard. I still need a pass rusher. I need a depth running back. I need to replace some guys in the defense at safety or at maybe nickel. So the first place I went, I didn't trade. I just stick and pick because I think this is a really good draft, and I really like the players who were available to me at 26. And it wasn't a dream scenario. My dream scenario is getting Jackson Powers Johnson or Troy Fontenot. Those are the guys I really like. Center out of Oregon and left tackle out of Washington, who will play interior in this situation. Some people think he can stay at the left tackle. I'm sure he can. I believe he can. But I think he's better suited inside. And unfortunately, neither of those guys were available when I picked. Those are sprint to the podium kind of guys if they're there. But there were still a lot of players who I really liked. And the one I ended up picking was center out of West Virginia, Zach Frazier. Now, I've got Lloyd Cushenberry playing center, so I'm going to bump Frazier over to guard. So that's my new starting left guard. And maybe in a couple of years, he can bump in the middle to center. But Zach Frazier is incredibly mobile. He is super athletic. He works well into space. He can get to the second level, make those blocks on linebackers, and you already know blocks at the second and third level, those are touchdown blocks. After that, there's no one left to tackle. So if you're going to run a lot of zone stuff, guys getting into space, guys pulling, you want a guy who's mobile, and that's Zach Frazier. He also has that wrestling background. A lot of people really value that when looking at offensive linemen. He was a 4-time state champion in high school. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar, you only have 4 years in high school. So he was state champion as a freshman, as a sophomore, as a junior, and as a senior. Walked in the door state champion. That's really good. To say you can't do any better than that. So he has tons of experience both in college football and in wrestling, fighting with his hands and grappling. That's where he lives. So that combination of hand usage and athletic ability, I think, is going to translate extremely well. He's big enough to hold his own with the big boys in the NFL, and I think he's going to be a plug-and-play starter. Next up on my list, I said it is an underrated need for the Bucs, wide receiver. And I'm going with wide receiver out of Washington, Jalen Polk. Now, this is a guy who I think is kind of being overlooked a little bit. The big name on that team, obviously, Rome Odunze. He's going to be a top 10 pick. They also had Michael Penix, the quarterback. He was right there in the mix for the Heisman. They had weapons everywhere. I mentioned Troy Fontenot. I think he's going to be a top 16 pick. And then you got Jalen Polk, who just quietly went about his business and played really well. And he is not the biggest guy. He's not the fastest guy. He wasn't the most productive guy. but he wasn't non-productive. He's not small. He's not slow. And this is a guy who had nearly 1,200 yards last year and 9 touchdowns. This is a guy who is 6'2", and ran a 4.5 40. Honestly, I think if you put him in a situation similar to how the Lions use Amon-Ra St. Brown, how the Bucs have used Chris Godwin in the past, I think Jalen Polk is really going to thrive. I think he could be a Pro Bowl caliber wide receiver, like we've seen with Amon-Ra St. Brown, or Cooper Kupp, or Chris Godwin. That slot assassin. All he does is make tough catches. All he does is get open. He's not flashy, but he's really, really good. And with Chris Godwin going into the last year of his deal, that could be your heir apparent. You ease him in as a rookie. You get him some touches. He improves your offense this year, another weapon to throw to. And then you can let Chris Godwin walk in the offseason, and you got your replacement in-house. Then you got Mike Evans, Trey Palmer, Jalen Polk. That's still, assuming Palmer continues to develop, that's still a pretty good group of wide receivers. Next, I finally address pass rusher. And this is a guy who I think is probably going to go a little bit higher in the draft than what he's projected. But at the same time, he didn't have a particularly strong combine. He's just kind of okay. And there were a lot of really, really good athletes at this combine. So I think maybe that pushes him down a little bit. But I really like Austin Booker out of Kansas. He is a kind of a one-year wonder. He transferred to Kansas this year, and this was the first time he really got on the field, and he was great. He uses his hands well. He had a little bit of a lean build, but he's got bend. He's got some explosiveness. I really like his game. Let's see. Last year he had 8 sacks and 2 forced fumbles. He's 6'4", 240. He's a leaner guy, but he's stronger than you expect. He's wiry strong. Wiry, as they say in the replacements. So maybe he's just another face in the crowd. Maybe he is, at that same tier of Anthony Nelson or a Joe Chayinchowinka. But if you've just got wave after wave of pass rusher coming in, if that's the worst case scenario, that's still okay. And if he can turn into a starting caliber player, an above average starting caliber player, then that's what you're looking for. And I would have liked to go pass rusher earlier, but I just didn't find the value. I like Chop Robinson, who could very well be available at pick 26. He's super athletic, but he's raw. Doesn't use his hands super well. He's not great against the run all the time. That's kind of a hit or miss pick. And the Bucs already kind of have that on the roster with JTS. That was his profile. Very good athlete, still developing as a player. And the Bucs took a big swing, and I really liked that they did that at the end of the first round after they won the Super Bowl. But that swing hasn't really come to fruition. So I don't know if they want them to try to take that same kind of swing on a raw pass rusher. You already got that. Now take a guy who's a little bit more polished, a guy who's still very bendy, a guy who could, at worst, just be a designated pass rusher. And you sub in JTS, you sub in Nelson on the running downs. I'd be fine with that. If this guy turns into Yannick Ngakoue, that's a win for the Bucs. So I'm taking the swing on a guy I like who's good with his hands. 4th round pick, I get that backup running back. And my mantra this offseason, the Bucs have to find their Gus Edwards, their Gus Bus, guy who is just a powerhouse. And Gus Edwards is a free agent, and I would like the Bucs to take a run at him. But I already spent all my money. I couldn't get him. I couldn't afford him. So I'm going to get that version of player And it's a name who's been commonly linked to the Bucs since they signed their offensive coordinator, who came from Kentucky. That's Kentucky's running back, Ray Davis. Ray Davis, he's short, he's stout, he's powerful, he can catch the ball. He is exactly what the Bucs are looking for. So, would I like to get him a little bit later? I'd like to, but Bucs don't have a 5th-round pick. I think he could be available a little bit later than this. Not because he doesn't have the talent to go this high, but he's going to be a 24-year-old rookie. He's old. He played 5 years of college. That doesn't really matter for me. I think it'll matter to the league for some teams. He's not going to be a featured piece. He's not a long-term solution. But that's not what the Bucs are drafting him for. They already have Rachaad White as their long-term guy. They need a complement. And a lot of times in the NFL, you get a running back, you use him up for his rookie deal, and then you move on. And it doesn't matter if that rookie is 21 years old or 27 years old. You get the best out of him. You get the juice for all it's worth on the squeeze on the orange. And then you move on. It's done. You move on to the next guy, next rookie on day 3. So it doesn't bother me that he's old. 24 is old in terms of NFL rookies. Then you have him for his 24, 25, 26 season. He can be a free agent, move on to the next team at 27. Cool. That's fine. 3 years of quality depth running back is great. I will take that in a heartbeat right here. Then we kind of get to those 6th and 7th round picks. And again, it's really just throwing darts. I don't really feel strongly about any of these guys. But, there are some names I like. At the 6th round pick, I got Gabe Hall. He is the defensive lineman out of Baylor. And he's big. He's got length to him. If the Bucs need a replacement for Will Golston, a rotational guy to complement Logan Hall, hey, just double up on your Halls. Gabe and Logan coming at you. And I've never really liked Logan Hall that much. I believe my exact words when the Bucs drafted him was, he's the worst case scenario. So if I can get a guy who can complement him, who can sub him in and out, and maybe even replace him on day 3, I think that's a big win. I feel really good about that. Next, my 7th round pick, I'm getting a depth tight end. Last time I got Hall. This time I'm getting All. Eric All, tight end out of Iowa. This guy's a pass catcher. And yes, I got Noah Fant in free agency. I've already got Cade Otton. So this guy is depth. He's developmental. He is a low-risk swing. We know Iowa produces great tight ends. He only played there for a year, and he didn't really play that much because he got hurt. But hey, this is still an Iowa tight end. He's a great pass catcher. He's supposed to be a very good athlete. You can get this guy, and if you can turn him into your next Cam Brate in a room where that tight end 3 option is wide open, I'm not in love with Payne Durham. I'm not in love with Kokieft. I could easily let guys like that walk if Eric All turns out to be a weapon. If he is your Cam Brate, if he is a guy who just catches everything, a guy who can get open, I will take that in a heartbeat. And getting him in the 7th round, I think that's great value. And finally, my last pick, I took Cornelius Johnson, wide receiver out of Michigan. Honestly, I don't think he's that good. I really don't. But you know what I do think he is fast. And if he can compete with a guy like Raheem Jarrett as that 5th, 6th bubble wide receiver, maybe a guy who can return punts, he's got the speed to be dangerous, maybe carve out a niche for himself on this team, that's all you're looking for at the 7th round. Maybe some special teams, maybe some developmental traits. You're not expecting to get a contributor. And I don't think Cornelius Johnson will be, but maybe can carve out a role. And that's as good as I can hope for here. So that's it. That's my draft. That's my free agency. I add a center and a tight end in free agency. I bring back all the key guys, and then I get a guard, I get a pass rusher, I get a receiver. Then I get some depth guys, running back, defensive line, tight end. It's not going to be flashy. You're going to get a couple of starters. You're going to get – you need 2 interior offensive linemen, center and guard. So however the Bucs want to address that, it needs to be addressed. I went 1 in free agency, 1 in the draft. Garrett did the same. It has to happen. You cannot roll out Robert Hainsey again next year. You cannot roll out Aaron Stinney again next year. We saw it. It was bad. There's a reason the Bucs have been the worst running game in the league the last 2 years. Offensive line has not been good. And it's not because Tristan Wirfs isn't good. And we've seen the Bucs start to address it. Luke Gadecki, really good right tackle. It's turned into a really good player. Cody Mock, I thought, had a great rookie year. Coming from North Dakota State, Division II. Jumping up not just to Division I, but to the NFL. I mean, he is coming from a school that's below like the MAC level of play. So you're jumping up from like the MAC to the SEC to the NFL. That's like jumping 3 steps on the ladder, and he more than held his own. Were there growing pains? Yes. But he was much better than I expected, and I think he's going to be a really good player. So you're adding talent to the offensive line. You got to keep doing it. Adding a veteran presence in free agency and adding another really good player in the draft. Same with pass rusher. Probably won't get a big-time guy in free agency because pass rushers are expensive. So you take a swing on a guy you like in the draft, whether it's Adisa Isaac, whether it's Austin Booker. A name I really like in the second round is Chris Braswell from Alabama. You know, there are a couple of guys at the top who the Bucs probably won't have a shot at, and then you just pick your flavor after that. Who do you like? Who do you think will vibe well with this team? Maybe it's Chop Robinson. But it is something I expect that will be addressed early on. And then we both feel like wide receivers up there, whether that's a guy like Ladd McConkey, a guy like A.D. Mitchell, if you're looking to target that early, you have to start thinking about life after Chris Godwin, life after Mike Evans. You got him back, but for just 2 years. And who knows what he's going to look like 2 years from now. So this is a little bit planning for now, but also planning for the future. Whether it's Jalen Polk or I don't remember who Garrett drafted. He got Xavier Leggett, big wide receiver out of South Carolina. I think that's the blueprint. Garrett and I did these activities separately. We had no conversations about them, but really we came to the same conclusions. Pass rusher, double dipping on the offensive line, you add a playmaker. Got to get a receiver. That's what I expect. So that'll about do it for me tonight. Feel free, comment on this video, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's on Twitter, wherever you're watching, feel free to drop a comment. Who are your targets you want to see in free agency? Who do you want the Bucs to go after? Who do you like in the draft? You know, the draft season is really starting to pick up steam. Combine's over. Garrett and I are going to jump into our draft coverage probably 2 weeks from now. You know, we're going to talk a little bit more free agency next week, but after that, it's full-on draft season. It is less than 50 days away, so if you got guys you like, drop them in the comments. Let me know. With that said, I'm going to wrap it up. My name is JT Olson. You can find me on Twitter at IcewaterOlson. You can find all my written work at bucksreport.com. And then until next time, for me and my partner, Garrett Ballard, go Bucs.